The first component that we are going to tackle are the noodles. The word ramen means literally ra, to throw, and men, noodle, and is derived from the Chinese word that is considered its origin, la mian, or literally la, to stretch, and mian, which is noodle. The main feature of these noodles is they are particularly elastic. The first ingredient that makes ramen noodles so unique is a very uncommon ingredient in Western cooking, and that is kansui. Kansui is the alkaline water that was originally used in making ramen noodles because the source of the water was taken from a lake in Mongolia and had naturally high pH. Nowadays, water is combined with alkaline salts, potassium carbonate, and sodium carbonate to replace the natural kansui. In fact, flour and kansui are the only two ingredients required to classify noodles as ramen under the law and definition established by the Japanese government. Generally, these alkaline salts are used in 1% of the total dough weight. What are the effects of kansui in the noodle production? The principal effect is that the pH is raised to about 9, and this provides a very unique flavor and elasticity. For this reason, kansui noodles must always be cooked separately from the soup. The second ingredient that is important to the noodle production process is the flour. The wheat used is generally of a hard wheat variety with 11 to 12% protein content that tends to be milled very finely for maximum water absorption. The flour provides the wheat flavor and can also vary in type: white, rye, barley, whole wheat, or blends depending on the manufacturer. The important component found in flour are the starch and the protein. Imagine making noodles are like building a house. The starch provides the structure and are like the bricks. The protein forms the gluten and provides the network acting as the cement. Water is the third ingredient that makes ramen noodles so unique. Generally speaking, ramen noodles are considered very low hydration noodles by definition, with the water component averaging roughly 30 to 35% of flour by weight. This is why professional machines are necessary and handmade noodles are not very common. Expensive machinery means most outsource their noodle making to third-party professionals. The function of the water is to facilitate the hydration of the protein and the starch in the flour. Salt is also an important component in the flavor of the noodles and generally used in about 1% of the total weight. Egg is common, but not required, and provides texture and flavor characteristic of certain types of ramen noodles. Other ingredients such as wheat gluten, yellow food coloring, rice flour, flavoring such as chili powder, tomato paste, or squid ink can also be used in ramen noodles to a varying degree, but are not traditional ingredients. In our next section, we will elaborate some all-purpose ramen noodles. The recipe that we elaborate here uses an Italian machine and method that works well for noodles with relatively high hydration, more than 36% the weight of the flour. This will be a very good all-around versatile noodle. For noodles below this level of hydration, professional machinery is needed. So this is going to be a classic Tokyo style noodle. So the ingredients are going to be bread flour, salt, egg, water, and kansui. So the first step, we're going to be preparing the ingredients. We have the dry ingredients on one side, and we're going to mix those together with a whisk well. And now we're going to mix our wet ingredients. The egg with the water and the kansui. We're going to mix the dry ingredients first, make a little hole in the center, and add the wet ingredients. And this we're going to mix for about 3 minutes with our hand, or you can use a KitchenAid as you desire. This mass is referred to as soboro. or crumbs. We're going to let this dough rest for an hour at room temperature, covered with plastic wrap. This mostly relaxes the gluten while hydrating the dough. So now we have our dough well hydrated and well mixed, and it's starting to come together. Remember that this is a very low hydration dough, so while you're working on it, don't be worried if it's not completely hydrated and starts to fall apart. The important thing is that it comes together when we start to push it through the machine. And take it out, and I'm going to start to work on it with a rolling pin. Here what I'm trying to do is get it just thin enough to work through the first opening on the Italian machine. So when we think we're thin enough to get through the first opening, what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut the noodle dough in half to make it a little bit more manageable. And we're going to start running it through the machine. At this point in time, you don't have to worry if it starts falling apart. Through subsequent pressings, it's going to look a lot better. The idea is just to get it through the machine on the first hole, put it back together, and repeat. Folding as much as necessary until it starts to come into a cohesive dough. Fold and repeat. Fold and repeat. So we've run the dough through the machine through its widest opening several times, folding and repeating. Right now we've got the dough is roughly about, I'd say, 4 milliliters thick. We want to take it down to about 1.5, 2 millimeters maximum. So what we're going to do now is we're going to pass it through the rollers, consecutively lowering the amount of the thickness one by one. The next setting would be on this machine would be 2. We'll pass to 3. Four. Five. And I think this would be a good time to take a new measurement. So now I'm going to square off a little bit of the edges. And we're going to cut the noodles with the pasta cutter. Okay, so now we've got our beautiful alkaline noodles cut. Personally, I prefer the longer, the better the noodle. But it is important the portion size. And so what we're looking for portion size is about 130 to 135 grams per portion. The last step is that we need to age the noodles. We're going to let them stand in the fridge for 24 hours before using, or we can alternatively freeze them. This step is important for the development of the flavor and the texture of the finished product. And there it is. Many ramen shops buy their noodles, as I do, and each has a preference for brand. For me, the best quality is Sun Noodles. Stretching and compacting them correctly is essential, and for this, a manual machine like the one used in the video can give us good results. Nothing is better than using specialized machinery for ramen noodle making. Of course, some ramen shops do make their own noodles. These machines are large pieces of equipment and can cost between 8,000 and 25,000 euros in Japan. The best brand is Yamamoto. These machines start to be profitable when they produce and serve around 500 portions per day. The variations that we see in the various types of noodles include water content, noodle shapes, and diameter size. Thin, straight noodles tend to have less water and more protein and go with very hearty tonkotsu ramen style broths. Matsu water content is considered to be very, very dry, with less than 30% hydration. This type of a ramen noodle would be impossible to make by hand because of the sheer pressure needed to have such little water worked into the dough. Thicker, wavy noodles tend to have more water and less protein and pair well with shio, shoyu, and miso ramen broths. Tokyo wavy water content is around 35% hydration. When cooking these noodles, it is of utmost importance to respect the cooking times. At Chuka, we continue to use a series of cooking timers to make sure that the noodles are cooked to the proper amount of time as to avoid overcooking. It is also important to strain and shock the noodles correctly before introducing them into the hot soup. Excess water from cooking can dilute the broth, the subject of our next section.